My parents canceled my 18th birthday party because my spoiled little brother wanted to buy himself a new toy car. Turning 18 is supposed to be a big deal. It's the moment when you finally step into adulthood, a milestone that's meant to be celebrated. I had been dreaming about my 18th birthday for years, imagining the perfect party with my closest friends, a day that was all about me. My parents had always promised that when the time came, they'd make it unforgettable. I held on to that promise, especially during the rough patches, when it felt like I was always playing second fiddle to my younger brother Dylan. Dylan. Just thinking about him made my blood pressure spike. He's 5 years younger than me, a ball of energy with a charm that could talk his way out of any situation. Everyone loves Dylan. Teachers, neighbors, even the random cashier at the grocery store who always gives him an extra piece of candy. He's the golden child, the one who never hears the word no. And me? I'm the responsible one, the one who always had to set the example, the one who cleaned up the messes Dylan left behind. But despite everything, I tried not to let it bother me. This year things would be different. My 18th birthday was going to be mine, a day where I didn't have to worry about anyone else. I'd been planning it for months, picking out decorations, deciding on the menu, and even saving up for a dress that made me feel like a princess. My friends were just as excited, and we had our plans locked in, a small gathering at home with good food, music, and a night of laughter. Everything was set, or so I thought. It was about a week before my birthday when things started to go sideways. It began innocently enough with Dylan plopping down beside me on the couch one evening, his eyes wide with excitement. He had just come back from a trip to the mall with our parents and was practically vibrating with energy. "Guess what I saw at the toy store?" he announced, barely able to contain himself. I glanced up from my book, half listening. "What?" "This awesome toy car. It's like the coolest thing ever. It's a limited edition, and it's got these lights that blink and this remote control that makes it go super fast. You should have seen it." Dylan's words tumbled out in a rush, his enthusiasm contagious despite my attempts to ignore it. "That's cool," I replied, not really paying attention. Dylan was always finding something new to obsess over. I figured this would be no different. He'd beg for it. Our parents would say yes like they always did, and a week later it would be forgotten in a pile of other toys. But Dylan wasn't done. "I really want it," he said, his voice taking on that whiny tone that always made my teeth clench. "I asked Mom and Dad, and they said they'd think about it. But they didn't say no, so I think they'll get it for me." I nodded absently, my mind already drifting back to my birthday plans. The only thing left to finalize was the cake. Chocolate with raspberry filling, my favorite. I was planning to pick it up the day before the party, making sure everything was just right. Nothing was going to ruin this day. Not even Dylan's latest toy obsession. At least, that's what I thought. The next few days flew by, and I was so caught up in the final details of the party that I barely noticed how quiet Dylan had become. Usually he'd be buzzing around the house, talking non-stop about whatever had caught his interest. But now, he was unusually subdued, and our parents seemed to be acting strange too. They'd exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking, their faces tight with some unspoken worry. I didn't think much of it. I was too focused on my party, the guest list, and making sure everything was perfect. I couldn't wait for the day to arrive, when I could finally celebrate with my friends and have a day that was all about me. I didn't see the storm brewing on the horizon. It wasn't until the night before my birthday that everything came crashing down. We were having dinner, the four of us sitting around the table like any other evening. I was picking at my food, too excited to eat, when my mom cleared her throat, catching my attention. "Honey, we need to talk to you about something," she began, her voice unusually hesitant. I looked up, surprised by her tone. "Okay. What's up?" My dad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, avoiding my gaze. Dylan, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, suddenly looked down at his plate, his face turning pink. "We've been thinking about your birthday plans," my mom continued, her words slow and careful. "And we know how much you've been looking forward to it. But, well, something's come up." A knot formed in my stomach. "What do you mean something's come up?" My mom glanced at my dad, who finally spoke up, his voice gruff. "It's about Dylan." Of course it was. It was always about Dylan. "What about him?" I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "He's been really looking forward to getting this toy car," my dad said, his words making me freeze. "The one he saw at the mall. It's something he's wanted for a long time." My heart sank as the pieces started to fall into place. "And?" My mom took a deep breath, her eyes filled with something like guilt. "The thing is, it's a bit more expensive than we thought. We've been trying to figure out how to make it work, but, well, with the costs of the party and everything, we're a little short." I stared at her, my brain struggling to keep up with what she was saying. "So, what are you trying to say?" My dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We're saying that we've decided to put the money towards getting Dylan the car. It means we'll have to cancel your party." For a moment I just sat there, stunned into silence. My 18th birthday party, the day I'd been planning and looking forward to for months, was being canceled so that Dylan could have a new toy? A toy he'd probably forget about in a week? "You're canceling my party?" I finally managed to say, my voice barely more than a whisper. My mom reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away, too shocked to let her comfort me. "We know this is disappointing, sweetheart, but you'll have other birthdays, other chances to celebrate. Dylan's been really excited about this, and we want to make sure he gets what he wants." Disappointment? That didn't even begin to cover what I was feeling. Anger, betrayal, hurt. All of it crashed over me in waves, leaving me struggling to breathe. "But it's my 18th birthday," I protested, my voice breaking. "I've been planning this for months. You promised me—" "We know," my dad interrupted, his tone firm, "and we're sorry. But Dylan's really been looking forward to this. We'll make it up to you, I promise." I looked over at Dylan, who was staring down at his plate, avoiding my eyes. He didn't say anything, didn't even look sorry. He just sat there, knowing he'd won yet again. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My own parents, the people who were supposed to care about me the most, had chosen to prioritize Dylan's fleeting desire over a milestone I'd been waiting my whole life to celebrate. I could barely believe it. Without a word, I pushed back my chair and stood up, my legs shaking as I turned and walked out of the dining room. I could hear my parents calling after me, but I didn't stop. I didn't want to hear their excuses or apologies. I didn't want to be anywhere near them. I went to my room and slammed the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was going to explode, the anger and hurt threatening to overwhelm me. How could they do this to me? How could they just cancel my birthday like it was nothing? As I sat on my bed trying to calm the storm inside me, one thing became crystal clear. I was done being second place. Done with always being the one who had to compromise, the one who had to understand. This was supposed to be my day, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. Not Dylan, and certainly not my parents. If they thought they could just brush me aside, they were in for a rude awakening. I was going to make sure they regretted this. I spent the night wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with anger and hurt. My parents had always had a blind spot when it came to Dylan, but this was different. They had canceled my 18th birthday party, a day that was supposed to be special to indulge Dylan's latest whim. The injustice of it all churned inside me, making sleep impossible. By morning, my anger had hardened into something cold and unyielding. I could hear my parents and Dylan downstairs, their voices muffled through the walls, but I didn't want to see any of them. Not after what they'd done. They hadn't just taken away my party. They'd shown me, in no uncertain terms, where I stood in this family. Eventually, I knew I couldn't avoid them forever. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on some clothes, and headed downstairs. The sight that greeted me only fueled the fire inside me. Dylan was sitting at the kitchen table, a huge grin on his face as he admired a brochure for the toy car. My parents hovered nearby, their faces filled with the kind of indulgent affection they reserved only for him. "Oh, hey!" Dylan greeted me as if nothing had happened. "Look at this! I'm getting the coolest car ever!" He shoved the brochure toward me, as if expecting me to share in his excitement. I forced myself to look at the glossy pictures. The toy car was shiny and sleek, the kind of thing any kid would go nuts over. But all I could see was the price tag and what it had cost me. "That's nice, Dylan," I said flatly, pushing the brochure back to him. I couldn't muster any enthusiasm, not when the memory of last night was still so raw. Dylan barely noticed my lack of interest. He was too caught up in his own excitement, his eyes practically sparkling as he chattered on about all the features the car had. "It's got this remote control that can make it do flips, and it has these cool lights that change color, and the tires are real rubber. Isn't that awesome?" I glanced at my parents, hoping to see some hint of remorse or guilt. But they were just smiling at Dylan, completely oblivious to my pain. My mom caught my eye and gave me a strained smile, like she was trying to smooth things over without actually addressing the problem. "Sweetie," she began, her tone overly sweet, "we know you're upset about your party, but we were thinking we could do something special for you next weekend. Maybe a dinner at your favorite restaurant?" My favorite restaurant? The suggestion was so laughable that I almost couldn't believe she was serious. A dinner out was supposed to make up for the fact that they had canceled my party? My 18th birthday party? "I don't want dinner," I snapped, unable to keep the bitterness out of my voice. "I wanted my party, the one you promised me." My dad sighed as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Look, we understand you're disappointed, but Dylan's been wanting this car for a long time. We had to make a choice, and we thought you'd understand." "Understand?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You canceled my birthday for a toy. How is that supposed to be fair?" Dylan, who had been absorbed in the brochure, finally looked up, sensing the tension. "It's just a party," he said, shrugging like it was no big deal. "You can have another one next year." His words hit me like a slap in the face. He didn't get it. He didn't get any of it. I wasn't surprised. How could he, when he'd spent his whole life being the center of attention, the one who always got what he wanted? But my parents should have understood. They should have seen how much this meant to me. But they didn't. They were too busy catering to Dylan, too wrapped up in his happiness to notice that they were crushing mine. And that realization hurt more than anything else. "Yeah, maybe I will," I muttered, turning away from them. I didn't want to argue anymore. It was clear I wasn't going to win, and I was tired of fighting for something that should have been mine without question. As I walked away, I could hear my parents trying to soothe Dylan, who had started pouting at the idea that his excitement might have caused a problem. They were quick to reassure him, promising that everything was fine, that he didn't need to worry. Of course, it was always about keeping Dylan happy, making sure his world stayed perfect. But what about me? I was supposed to be the mature one, the one who could handle disappointment, the one who understood that Dylan was just a kid. I retreated to my room, shutting the door behind me as the weight of it all pressed down on me. The walls of my room felt like a prison, trapping me in this life where I was always second best, always the one who had to give up, to step aside. As I sat on my bed, staring blankly at the wall, memories from the past started flooding back. It wasn't just this birthday. This was a pattern, one that had started as far back as I could remember. There was the time when I was 8 and had saved up my allowance for weeks to buy a doll I'd been dreaming of. But the day we were supposed to go to the store, Dylan had thrown a tantrum because he wanted to go to the amusement park instead. My parents had caved, promising I could get the doll next time. But next time never came. Then there was the school play in middle school where I had the lead role. My parents had promised to come, but on the day of the performance, Dylan had a soccer game. My dad showed up halfway through the play, and my mom never made it at all. They had apologized later. saying they couldn't let Dylan down, but the hurt had lingered. And now my 18th birthday, the day that was supposed to be about me, was being overshadowed by Dylan's latest obsession. It was like history repeating itself, only this time I couldn't just let it go. I was done being the one who always had to understand, who always had to step aside. I was done being second best in my own family. This was my 18th birthday, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. As the anger simmered inside me, I started to form a plan. If my parents weren't going to give me the birthday I deserved, then I'd take matters into my own hands. I didn't need their permission, and I didn't need their money. I'd figure out a way to make this day special on my own terms, without their help. And if Dylan and my parents thought they could just brush me aside like I didn't matter, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Determined to reclaim my birthday, I threw myself into action. My parents might have decided to cancel the party, but I wasn't about to let that ruin my plans. I had spent months imagining how my 18th birthday would be, and I wasn't going to let their favoritism and Dylan's whims take that away from me. First, I texted my best friend Emily, the one person I knew I could count on no matter what. If anyone could help me turn this disaster around, it was her. My fingers flew over the screen as I explained what had happened, how my parents had canceled my party to buy Dylan that stupid toy car, and how furious I was. Within seconds, Emily replied, "Are you kidding me? They canceled your 18th birthday for a toy? That's insane. We'll make sure you still have the best birthday ever, don't worry." Her words were like a lifeline. At least someone understood how important this day was to me. I couldn't rely on my parents, but I had friends who cared, who would help me celebrate the way I deserved. We spent the next few hours texting back and forth, coming up with a plan. It was short notice, but Emily was a miracle worker when it came to organizing things last minute. We decided that instead of a big party at my house, we'd have a small, intimate gathering at her place. Just our closest friends, some good food, and a lot of laughs. It wasn't the grand celebration I'd originally envisioned, but it was something. And it was mine. By the time we'd ironed out the details, I felt a little better. I might not have the party I'd been dreaming of, but at least I wouldn't be sitting at home, wallowing in disappointment while Dylan played with his new toy. I had taken back some control, and that felt good. The next day, I tried to keep my head down and avoid my parents as much as possible. I didn't want to hear any more excuses or apologies. They had made their choice, and I was making mine. But as the hours ticked by, I couldn't shake the anger that simmered just beneath the surface. This was supposed to be my day, the day I officially became an adult. And instead, I felt like I was still just a kid in their eyes, someone whose wants and needs were always secondary to Dylan's. Finally, the day of my birthday arrived. I woke up with a mix of anticipation and dread. On one hand, I was excited to see my friends, to have something that was still mine. But on the other hand, I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach, the lingering bitterness that had taken root. When I went downstairs, the house was quiet, eerily so. My parents were in the kitchen, talking in hushed voices, and Dylan was nowhere to be seen. I steeled myself, expecting some kind of awkward attempt at a birthday greeting, but they didn't even seem to notice me at first. My mom was making coffee, my dad flipping through the newspaper, both of them wrapped up in their own world. "Morning," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. They both looked up, startled, as if they hadn't expected to see me. My mom offered a strained smile. "Morning, sweetie. How did you sleep?" "Fine," I lied, crossing my arms. "So, what's the plan for today?" My dad exchanged a glance with my mom, something unspoken passing between them. "We were thinking we could all have dinner together tonight. Just us. To celebrate." My heart sank. Dinner? That was their big plan? No cake, no presents, just a quiet dinner at home, like it was any other night? "What about Dylan?" I asked, the bitterness creeping into my voice. "Isn't today the big day for his car?" My mom's smile faltered, and she glanced down at her coffee cup. "We thought you might want to spend the day with your friends," she said, sidestepping the question. "You know, enjoy yourself." I bit back the angry retort that bubbled up inside me. Of course, they were trying to downplay it, to pretend that everything was fine, that they hadn't just blown off my birthday for Dylan. But I wasn't about to let them get away with it. "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm going over to Emily's later. We're having a little get-together." My dad looked relieved, as if that solved everything. "That sounds nice. We'll see you tonight, then." I nodded, not trusting myself to say anything else. I turned and headed back to my room, feeling the walls close in around me. My parents didn't get it. They never would. But I wasn't going to let them ruin what little happiness I had left today. A few hours later, I was getting ready to head over to Emily's when I heard the front door burst open, followed by Dylan's excited shouts. My heart sank as I realized what was happening. I walked out of my room just in time to see him race into the living room, holding a large box with a picture of the toy car plastered on the front. His face was lit up with pure joy, his eyes sparkling as he ripped open the packaging. "It's here! It's finally here!" he yelled, pulling the car out and setting it on the floor. It was exactly like he had described. Sleek, shiny, and way too expensive for what it was. My parents followed him in, their faces filled with pride and amusement as they watched Dylan play with his new toy. My mom glanced up at me, her smile faltering slightly when she saw my expression. "Look, sweetie, isn't it great?" she said, trying to sound cheerful. "Dylan's been waiting so long for this." I stared at them, feeling like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. This was supposed to be my day, and instead here I was, watching my parents fawn over Dylan and his new toy like nothing else mattered. "Yeah," I said, my voice hollow. "Great." I didn't wait for their response. I turned and grabbed my things, my hands trembling with the effort of holding back the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. I couldn't stay here, not with them acting like this was just another day. As I walked out the door, I could hear Dylan's laughter echoing behind me, a cruel reminder of everything I'd lost. I headed to Emily's, my heart heavy with the realization that no matter how much I tried to take control, my family would always find a way to make me feel small, insignificant. But I wasn't going to let them ruin this day completely. As I arrived at Emily's house, I forced myself to push the hurt and anger aside. My friends were here, waiting for me, ready to celebrate the way I deserved. And for a few hours I could forget about everything else. The small gathering was exactly what I needed, a break from the chaos at home. We ate, laughed, and talked about anything but my family. Emily had even managed to surprise me with a cake, complete with candles and everything. As I blew them out, I made a wish for something better, something that didn't revolve around being second to Dylan. The party was fun, but as the evening wore on and my friends began to leave, the weight of the day started to press down on me again. I knew I couldn't avoid going home forever, but the thought of walking back into that house, into the reality I'd been trying to escape, filled me with dread. Finally, it was just Emily and me sitting on her porch, the sky darkening as the sun dipped below the horizon. "I'm sorry about today," Emily said quietly, breaking the comfortable silence we'd fallen into. "Your parents were really unfair. You deserve better." I shrugged, trying to act like it didn't bother me as much as it did. "It is what it is. I guess I just have to accept that Dylan will always come first." Emily shook her head, her expression fierce. "That's not right, though. You're just as important, and they should see that. You're 18 now, an adult. They need to start treating you like one." Her words struck a chord in me, stirring something deep inside. I was 18 now. I didn't have to let my parents dictate my life, didn't have to keep playing the role of the dutiful, overlooked daughter. Maybe it was time to start making decisions for myself, to start living for me, not for their approval. "Maybe you're right," I said, a hint of determination creeping into my voice. Maybe it's time I started doing things my way." Emily smiled, her eyes bright with encouragement. "That's the spirit. You don't need their permission to be happy. You can make your own choices now." As I sat there letting her words sink in, I realized that she was right. I didn't have to wait for my parents to see my worth. I could create my own happiness, my own life, without needing their validation. When I finally got up to leave, I felt lighter, more in control. The hurt was still there, but it was starting to be overshadowed by something stronger, a determination to make sure that this birthday marked the beginning of a new chapter in my life, one where I wasn't defined by my parents' choices. As I walked home, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let this be the end of my story. My 18th birthday might not have gone the way I'd planned, but it was the start of something new, something better. And from now on, I was going to live for me, no matter what anyone else thought. When I opened the front door and stepped back into the house, I was greeted by the sight of Dylan and my parents huddled around the toy car, their faces lit with joy as Dylan showed off the car's tricks. But this time, the scene didn't fill me with anger. Instead, it fueled my resolve. I wasn't going to be the afterthought anymore. I was done being the responsible one, the one who always had to understand. It was time to take control of my own life, to start making decisions that were best for me. And if that meant standing up to my parents even if they didn't like it, so be it. I thought I was prepared for whatever came next. After leaving Emily's house with a new sense of resolve, I believed I could face my parents and handle whatever they threw my way. But nothing could have prepared me for the reality of what I walked into when I got home. As I stepped through the front door, I was hit with the sound of laughter, Dylan's laughter. It echoed through the house, a stark contrast to the heaviness I felt in my chest. My heart sank as I followed the noise into the living room, where my worst fears were confirmed. There, in the middle of the room, was Dylan's new toy car, zooming around on the hardwood floor. But it wasn't just the car that caught my attention. It was the scene surrounding it. My parents had gone all out. There were streamers hanging from the ceiling, balloons tied to the furniture, and a cake sitting on the coffee table. A cake! It was like a twisted version of the party I had planned for myself. Only this time the celebration wasn't for me, it was for Dylan. My parents were gathered around him, their faces beaming with pride and joy as they watched him play. "Look what I can do!" Dylan shouted, controlling the car with a shiny new remote, making it spin in circles and flash its lights. My parents clapped and cheered, completely absorbed in his happiness. They didn't even notice me standing in the doorway, frozen in disbelief. The scene before me was surreal. This was supposed to be my day, my celebration, but instead it had been hijacked and turned into a party for Dylan and his new toy. The toy that had cost me my 18th birthday. I felt something inside me break, a deep, painful crack that sent waves of hurt and anger through my entire body. I had known my parents favored Dylan, but this was beyond anything I could have imagined. They had canceled my party, promised me some half-hearted dinner as a consolation, and then turned around and thrown a celebration for him. It was like they were rubbing salt in the wound, making it crystal clear where their priorities lay. Finally, my mom glanced up and saw me standing there. Her smile faltered for a brief second before she plastered it back on, as if trying to pretend that everything was fine. "Oh, sweetie, you're home," she said brightly, as if she wasn't standing in the middle of the most blatant display of favoritism I'd ever seen. "We thought you'd be out a bit longer." I stared at her, struggling to find words. How could she act like this was normal, like I was supposed to just walk in and join the fun, like it wasn't supposed to be my birthday? My dad turned around and gave me a quick nod, too focused on whatever trick Dylan was performing to really pay attention to me. "Come on, check this out," Dylan shouted, his face lit up with excitement. "Look what it can do now!" He pressed a button, and the car zoomed across the floor, making everyone laugh and cheer. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They had forgotten. They had completely forgotten that today was supposed to be about me. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They hadn't just canceled my birthday party, they had replaced it. They had replaced me. My hands clenched into fists at my sides as I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. But the anger and hurt were too overwhelming. I couldn't hold it back any longer. "Are you kidding me?" I burst out, my voice louder than I intended. The laughter in the room died instantly and all eyes turned to me. "You threw him a party? On my birthday?" The room fell silent. My mom's smile wavered as she looked at me, a mix of guilt and confusion crossing her face. "It's not a party, sweetie," she said, her voice faltering. It sure looks like a party to me." I snapped, cutting her off. "You canceled my birthday party for some stupid toy." My dad frowned, his tone turning stern. "Watch your tone, young lady. There's no need to be rude." "No need to be rude?" I repeated, my voice shaking with rage. "You promised me a birthday party, and then you cancel it to buy Dylan a toy car. And now you're throwing him a party on my birthday. How am I supposed to feel?" Dylan had stopped playing with the car and was staring at me wide-eyed and confused. "I didn't mean to—" "This isn't about you, Dylan," I snapped, the anger boiling over. "It's about Mom and Dad choosing you over me again." My parents exchanged a look and I could see the frustration building in my dad's eyes. "We're not choosing sides," he said, his voice tight. "We made a decision that was best for everyone." "Best for everyone?" I let out a bitter laugh. "How is this best for me? How is canceling my birthday and throwing him a party best for me?" My mom took a step toward me, her expression softening as if she was trying to calm me down. "Sweetheart, we didn't mean for it to turn out like this. We just wanted to make sure Dylan was happy. We thought you'd understand." That was the final straw. The thing I'd been hearing my entire life. They thought I'd understand. They thought I'd be the bigger person, the one to step aside, always. "Well, I don't understand," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "I'm done understanding. I'm done being the one who always gets pushed aside for Dylan. Today was supposed to be my day, and you took it away from me." My dad's expression hardened. "You're being dramatic. It's just a birthday. You'll have plenty more." "That's not the point," I shouted, tears stinging my eyes. "You don't even care how I feel. You never do. It's always about Dylan." The room was deathly silent now, the weight of my words hanging in the air. My parents looked at me shocked, as if they hadn't realized how much they had hurt me until this very moment. But it was too little, too late. The damage was done. "I'm going to Emily's," I said, my voice tight as I turned and headed for the door. "Wait, let's talk about this," my mom pleaded, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. If I stayed another second, I was going to lose it completely. I grabbed my coat and stormed out the door, slamming it behind me. The cold air hit my face, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away, to escape the crushing weight of disappointment and betrayal that had been building inside me all day. I started walking, not really sure where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't go back home, not right now. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over, and I wiped them away angrily. I had been so stupid to think that today could be different, that I could finally have something that was mine. They had taken it away from me. They had chosen Dylan, just like they always did. And the worst part was, they didn't even see what they had done wrong. To them, I was being dramatic, overreacting, just like always. I wandered the streets aimlessly, my mind racing with everything I wanted to say, everything I wanted them to understand. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't matter. They would never see things from my perspective. They were too wrapped up in Dylan, too blind to their own favoritism. After what felt like hours, I ended up at the park near my house, the one where I used to play when I was little. I sat down on a bench, the cold seeping through my coat as I stared out at the empty playground. The swings creaked in the wind and the trees rustled softly, but the world around me felt eerily quiet. I thought about what Emily had said, about taking control of my own life, making my own choices. But right now, that felt impossible. How was I supposed to move forward when the people who were supposed to care about me the most kept pulling me back, making me feel like I was nothing? As I sat there shivering in the cold, I realized that something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, constantly fighting for scraps of attention and validation. I deserved more than that. I deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be valued. But if my parents weren't going to give me that, then I would have to find it somewhere else. Somehow I would have to learn to stand on my own, to build a life where I didn't need their approval to feel like I mattered. The thought was terrifying, but it was also freeing. For the first time, I started to see a way out, a way forward that didn't involve constantly compromising who I was to fit into the mold they had created for me. I sat there for a long time, letting the cold numb the pain inside me. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my brother. I had to start living for myself, no matter how hard that might be. Eventually, I got up and started walking again, this time with a clearer sense of direction. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. This was my life, and it was time I started taking control of it. As I walked through the dark streets, the wind biting at my cheeks, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't let anyone else decide my worth. Not my parents, not Dylan, not anyone. From now on, I would be the one to decide who I was and what I deserved. And it all started with walking away from the place that had held me back for so long. By the time I got home, the house was dark and silent, everyone already in bed. I quietly slipped inside, not wanting to deal with any more conversations or excuses. The weight of the day pressed down on me, but there was also a new resolve simmering beneath the surface, an understanding that things couldn't continue like this. I headed straight to my room, closing the door softly behind me. The anger that had fueled me earlier had cooled, leaving behind a deep, aching sadness. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, the events of the day replaying over and over in my mind. The balloons, the cake, the way my parents had smiled at Dylan like he was the center of the universe. It all made me feel so small, so invisible. I couldn't help but think of all the times I'd stepped aside, all the moments I'd sacrificed for Dylan, thinking that eventually my time would come. But now I knew the truth. My time would never come if I kept waiting for them to notice me. I grabbed my phone and opened the messaging app, scrolling through my contacts until I found Emily's name. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what I wanted to say. But then, with a deep breath, I typed out a simple message. "I'm done." Her reply came almost instantly. "What happened?" I told her everything. The party they threw for Dylan, the way they dismissed my feelings, the realization that I couldn't keep living like this. I poured out all the frustration, the hurt, the anger that had been building inside me for years. And as I typed, I felt a strange sense of relief, like I was finally letting go of something that had been weighing me down for too long. When I finished, Emily's response was exactly what I needed to hear. "You deserve better. You've always deserved better. Let's make a plan to get you out of there. Whatever you need, I'm here for you." A small, shaky smile tugged at my lips. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. I wasn't alone in this. I had people who cared about me, who saw my worth, even if my own family didn't. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my brother, constantly overlooked and pushed aside. It was time to take control of my own life, to start making choices that were best for me, even if that meant leaving behind the only home I'd ever known. With that thought in mind, I lay down, pulling the blankets up around me. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time I felt like I was moving in the right direction. As sleep finally claimed me, I made a silent promise to myself. I would find my own way, and I wouldn't let anyone hold me back. The next morning, the weight of everything that had happened still hung over me, but something had shifted. I felt a new resolve, a determination to start taking control of my life. My parents had shown me where I stood, and now it was up to me to decide where I was going. As I sat at the kitchen table, quietly eating breakfast, my parents moved around the house, acting as if nothing had changed. They exchanged a few awkward glances in my direction, but no one said anything about the day before. No apologies, no explanations, just silence. It was as if they were hoping to sweep it all under the rug, pretending that everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine, and I wasn't going to let them ignore it anymore. After I finished eating, I grabbed my phone and headed back to my room, my mind already racing with possibilities. I knew that staying here, in this house, with my parents' constant favoritism suffocating me, wasn't an option anymore. I needed to carve out a space for myself, somewhere I could finally breathe. I texted Emily, my fingers flying over the screen. "We need to talk. Can we meet up later?" Her response was immediate. "Absolutely. My place?" "Yeah, I'll be there in an hour." As I got ready to leave, I glanced around my room, feeling a strange mix of emotions. This had been my sanctuary for years, the one place where I could escape everything. But now, it felt more like a cage. I knew that if I stayed here, nothing would ever change. When I arrived at Emily's, she greeted me with a warm hug, her concern evident in her eyes. We sat down on the couch, and I wasted no time explaining my plan. "I need to move out," I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I can't stay in that house anymore, not with the way things are, but I don't know where to start." Emily listened intently, her expression serious. "You're right. You deserve better than what they're giving you. If moving out is what you need to do, then I'll help you figure it out." We spent the next few hours brainstorming, coming up with a plan. Emily offered to let me stay with her for a while, just until I could get on my feet. We talked about jobs, budgeting, and all the practical things that I'd need to consider. It was overwhelming, but it was also the first real step toward independence I'd ever taken. As we laid out the details, I felt a growing sense of empowerment. This was my chance to take control, to create a life where I didn't have to constantly compete for attention or validation. I wasn't just reacting to my parents' behavior anymore, I was choosing my own path. When I finally left Emily's house that afternoon, I felt a strange sense of calm. The road ahead was going to be tough, and there was still so much to figure out, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I was done waiting for my parents to see me, to value me. I was going to create my own value on my own terms, and as I walked back home, my mind already racing with the next steps, I knew that this was the beginning of something new. My life, my choices, my future, finally, they were in my hands. That evening, when I returned home, I felt different, stronger, more certain of what I needed to do. The tension in the house was still thick, my parents walking on eggshells around me, but I didn't let it affect me the way it had before. I was done tiptoeing around their expectations, done waiting for them to treat me as more than an afterthought. As I headed to my room, my dad's voice stopped me in the hallway. "We need to talk, kiddo." I paused, turning to face him. He was sitting at the kitchen table, a serious expression on his face. My mom was beside him, her hands clasped tightly together. I could see they were both bracing themselves for something, but I wasn't sure what. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral as I sat down across from them. There was a long, uncomfortable silence before my mom finally spoke. "We've been thinking about what happened yesterday, about your birthday, and, well, we didn't handle it right." My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest they'd come to acknowledging how much they'd hurt me. "We didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't important," my dad added, his tone gruff but sincere. "We got caught up in trying to make Dylan happy and we messed up." I looked at them both, the hurt still fresh but now tinged with something else. Resolve. This was my chance to say what I needed to say, to make it clear that things couldn't keep going the way they had been. "You did mess up," I agreed, my voice steady. "And it's not just about yesterday. It's been like this for years. I've always had to take a back seat to Dylan, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being the one who has to understand, who has to step aside. My mom's eyes filled with tears, and she reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled back, needing to keep my distance. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I continued, but I need you to hear me. I'm done being second place in my own life. I've decided that I'm going to move out. My words hung in the air, heavy and final. My parents stared at me in shock, clearly not expecting this. Move out? My dad echoed, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. But you're still in school. How are you going to manage that? I'll figure it out, I replied, my voice firm. Emily's offered to let me stay with her for a while just until I can get my own place. I need space, a chance to live my life without constantly feeling like I'm competing for your attention. Tears started to spill down my mom's cheeks, and my dad looked like he didn't know what to say. But we don't want you to go, my mom whispered, her voice breaking. We want you here with us. I know you do, I said softly but resolutely. But I need this. I need to find out who I am, away from all of this. I can't keep living in Dylan's shadow. There was a long silence as they absorbed my words. I could see the hurt in their eyes, the realization that they had pushed me to this point. But I also knew that this was the right choice for me. I had to take control of my life, and this was the first step. Finally, my dad nodded, though his expression was pained. If that's what you need, then we won't stop you. Just know that the door is always open if you change your mind. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. It wasn't going to be easy, but at least they were letting me go, letting me take this leap. I stood up, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't the end of my relationship with my parents, but it was the start of something new. A chance to live for myself, to make my own decisions, and to find out who I was outside of their expectations. As I headed back to my room to start packing, I knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and probably a lot of tough days. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was on the right path, a path that I had chosen for myself. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing, planning, and emotional goodbyes. I boxed up my belongings, each item a reminder of the life I was leaving behind and the new one I was about to create. It was bittersweet. Part of me was scared, but a bigger part of me knew this was the right decision. Emily was a constant presence, helping me pack and offering encouragement whenever doubts crept in. She reminded me of the independence I'd been craving, of the life I deserved to live. I held on to that, even as the reality of moving out started to hit. When the day finally came to leave, my parents were both there, their expressions a mix of sadness and reluctant acceptance. My mom hugged me tightly, tears in her eyes, while my dad stood a little apart, trying to hold it together. "We're going to miss you," my mom whispered, her voice trembling. "But we understand why you need to do this." I nodded, my throat tight with emotion. "I'll miss you too, but I need to figure things out on my own." My dad stepped forward, his eyes serious. "Take care of yourself, okay? And remember, if you ever need anything, we're just a phone call away." "I will," I promised, feeling the weight of their words. This wasn't goodbye forever. It was a step towards something new, something that was mine. With that, I grabbed my bags and walked out the door. As I stepped outside, the crisp air filled my lungs, carrying away the last remnants of doubt. Emily was waiting for me in her car, and as I climbed in, I felt a surge of relief. "You ready?" she asked, a smile playing on her lips. I looked back at the house one last time, then turned to face her, my own smile spreading. "Yeah, I'm ready." The drive to Emily's felt like the first real breath of freedom I'd taken in a long time. We chatted about everything and nothing, the future stretching out before us like an open road. For the first time, I felt like I was in control of where that road would lead. When we arrived at Emily's place, she helped me carry my things inside, setting them down in the small guest room that would be mine for now. It wasn't much, but it was a start. a place where I could begin building the life I wanted. As I unpacked, I thought about the journey ahead, the challenges I'd face, and the person I wanted to become. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be worth it. I was finally stepping out of Dylan's shadow, stepping into the light of my own life. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The path ahead was uncertain, but it was mine. I was no longer waiting for someone else to see my worth. I was creating it for myself. And that was the best birthday gift I could have ever given myself. The first few days at Emily's were a mix of excitement and adjustment. It felt strange to wake up in a new place without the familiar sounds of my family moving around the house. But it was also liberating. This was the start of my new life, a life where I could make my own decisions without feeling overshadowed by Dylan or undervalued by my parents. Emily was a constant source of support, and we quickly settled into a comfortable routine. She was more than just a friend. She was a lifeline, helping me navigate this new chapter with confidence and optimism. We spent our evenings talking about everything from my plans for the future to the small challenges of living on my own for the first time. It was like being in a constant state of discovery, both of the world around me and of myself. But despite the newfound freedom, there were moments when doubt crept in. I'd be lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, and the weight of everything would suddenly hit me. Had I made the right choice? Could I really handle this? The uncertainty was terrifying, and there were times when I wondered if I should have stayed, tried to make things work with my family. One evening, as I was unpacking the last of my things, Emily knocked on my door, her usual bright smile dimmed by concern. "Hey, you okay?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. I hesitated before answering. "Yeah, mostly. It's just a lot to take in, you know." She nodded, coming into the room and sitting on the bed beside me. "I get it. Change is scary. But you're doing great, and you're not alone in this." I looked at her, grateful for her unwavering support. "Thanks, Emily. I don't know what I'd do without you." She grinned, giving my shoulder a playful shove. "You'd be fine. You're stronger than you think." Her words resonated with me, echoing in my mind long after she'd left the room. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. I had made it this far, hadn't I? I'd taken a stand, made a choice, and was carving out a life for myself. That wasn't something to take lightly. As the days turned into weeks, I began to find my footing. I got a part-time job at a local cafe which helped with my expenses and gave me a sense of independence. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. I began saving money little by little, dreaming of the day when I could afford a place of my own. In the meantime, I focused on building the life I wanted. I spent more time with my friends, exploring new hobbies, and learning more about myself than I ever had before. The fear and doubt didn't disappear overnight, but they began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of confidence and self-assurance. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I sat down at the small desk in my room and pulled out a notebook. I hadn't written in a journal in years, but something inside me needed an outlet, a way to process everything that had happened. As I began to write, the words flowed freely. I wrote about my journey, the struggles, the triumphs, and the lessons I'd learned along the way. I wrote about the pain of leaving home, the joy of discovering my own strength, and the hope I had for the future. And as I filled the pages, I realized something important. This journey wasn't just about finding my independence. It was about finding myself. For so long I had defined myself by my family's expectations, by my role as the older sibling, by the shadow of Dylan's needs. But now, I was beginning to see who I was beyond all that. I was someone who could stand up for herself, who could make tough decisions, who could build a life worth living. And that realization filled me with a sense of peace and pride that I hadn't felt in a long time. As I closed the notebook, a small smile tugged at my lips. The road ahead was still long, and there would be challenges I couldn't yet foresee. But for the first time I felt ready to face them. I wasn't just finding my footing, I was finding my place in the world, one step at a time. And this time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. A few months had passed since I first moved in with Emily, and life had settled into a new rhythm. I'd grown more comfortable in my job at the cafe, started saving a decent amount of money, and even found time to explore new hobbies, like painting and yoga. The uncertainty that had once gnawed at me was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I was learning to trust myself, to believe that I could handle whatever came my way. Emily and I had become closer than ever, and her home had truly started to feel like my own. We spent our evenings cooking dinner together, binge-watching our favorite shows, and talking about our dreams for the future. It was the kind of friendship that felt more like family, a bond built on mutual support, honesty, and a lot of laughter. But as much as I loved living with Emily, I knew it was time to take the next step. I had saved up enough to start looking for my own place, and the idea of having something that was completely mine, a space where I could fully express who I was exciting. It felt like the final piece of the puzzle, the last step in reclaiming my independence. One evening, after a long shift at the cafe, I sat down with Emily in the living room. I'd been toying with the idea of telling her for days, but I didn't want her to think I was rushing to leave. We were sitting on the couch, a bowl of popcorn between us, when I finally worked up the courage to bring it up. "So, I've been thinking," I began, glancing over at her. "I think I'm ready to start looking for my own place." Emily paused mid-bite, then turned to face me with a wide smile. "I was wondering when you were going to say that. I was starting to worry you'd never want to leave." I laughed, relieved by her reaction. "I didn't want you to think I was in a hurry to go. I love living with you, it's been amazing. But I think I'm ready to take the next step, you know?" She nodded, her expression warm and understanding. "Of course you are. I'm so proud of you. You know that? You've come so far since you first moved in. You're going to do great on your own." Her words filled me with a sense of pride. I had come a long way, and knowing that Emily believed in me made the journey feel even more worthwhile. We spent the rest of the evening discussing potential apartments, setting up viewings, and daydreaming about what my new place could look like. It was exciting, nerve-wracking, and empowering all at once. A few weeks later, after a lot of searching and a few dead ends, I finally found it. A small, cozy apartment not too far from Emily's place. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was perfect for me. The moment I walked through the door, I knew it was where I was meant to be. The light-filled living room, the little kitchen with just enough space for one, and the quiet bedroom where I could escape from the world, it all felt right. I signed the lease that day, and as I held the keys in my hand, a wave of emotions washed over me. This was it. My own place, my own space, a place where I could continue to grow, to explore who I was, to live on my own terms. Moving in was a whirlwind of excitement and hard work. Emily helped me pack up my things, and before I knew it, I was standing in the middle of my new apartment, surrounded by boxes, but filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. This was my space, a reflection of who I had become, a person who had learned to stand on her own, who had found her voice and her strength. That first night in my new apartment, I sat on the floor with a glass of wine, looking around at the empty rooms that would soon be filled with the life I was building. I thought about everything that had led me here, the disappointment, the hurt, the moments of doubt, and how each step had brought me closer to this place, to this moment. As I sat there, I realized something important. The journey I had been on wasn't just about leaving home or finding a place to live. It was about finding myself, about learning to trust in my own decisions, my own worth. It was about understanding that I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel valuable or loved. I had found that within myself, and as I looked toward the future, I knew there would be more challenges, more moments of doubt. But I also knew that I was ready for them. I was strong enough, capable enough, and determined enough to face whatever came next. That night, as I lay in bed in my new apartment, I felt a sense of peace and fulfillment that I had never known before. I had taken control of my life, made decisions for myself, and created something beautiful out of the chaos. I had found my place in the world, a place that was truly mine, and as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but smile, knowing that this was just the beginning of an incredible journey. Thank you for following my story. Have you ever had to find your own path in life, even when it meant making difficult choices? I'd love to hear your thoughts or stories. Remember, the journey might be tough, but it's always worth it when you're true to yourself. Here's to new beginnings and finding your own place in the world.